very warm welcome. You're watching the WION-VOA Co-Production with me, Alison Lagrange. Now, more than 100 members of the Ukrainian military are in Poland for intense training on the German-made Leopard 2 battle tanks. Ukrainian leaders say the tanks, promised by Western allies 3 weeks ago, will help save lives and play a key role in the fight against Russian forces. Voice of America's Miroslava Gongazede has more from an army base camp in Świętoszyw in Poland. Listen in.
At this army base in Świętoszyw, Poland, more than 100 Ukrainian troops are undergoing intense training. They were pulled from the front lines in Ukraine to learn how to operate German-made Leopard 2 tanks provided by Western allies. They are working side by side with training instructors from Canada, Norway and Poland. The Ukrainian troops, who had been fighting in the Donetsk and Luhansk region, are training 10 hours a day, including weekends.
The
training is very condensed in timing. The time is the element that is the biggest issue for us. Ukrainian troops are experienced. They came here straight from the front line.
Instead of the usual 3 months, officials say the Ukrainians will be ready to take these tanks to the battlefield in a little more than a month. Ukrainian Army Major Vadim Khodak is leading the training and says his troops are poised to learn quickly.
My soldiers have combat experience. They didn't come from the street. They've been fighting on our tanks for some time, so it is a lot easier for them to learn how to use this.
Khodak says these tanks will be key on the battlefield.
At the moment, we are very short of armored vehicles, and I hope that when we get to the front line with this equipment, it will save a lot of lives of our soldiers and bring us closer to victory.
The first delivery of 14 battlefield tanks is planned as soon as next month. Leopard 2 tanks are expected to boost Kyiv forces as the war with Russia approaches the 1-year mark. European partners plan to send 2 Leopard 2 tanks battalions to Ukraine. There are around 2,000 Leopard 2 vehicles spread across Europe. Officials say they expect the first delivery of 14 battlefield-ready tanks as a first step next month. Polish President Andrzej Duda visited the training site on Monday and praised Ukrainians fighting against Russia.
Ukrainians are defending us all. They are defending Europe as well against new Russian imperialism. And we know the face of Russian imperialism from our history. And our neighbors, Ukrainians, are defending us. And we thank them for that.
Duda added Poland is offering support for the Ukrainians and called on Western allies to send more equipment to Ukraine in weeks to come. Miroslava Gongazede, VOA News, Świętoszyw.
Joining us now with additional analysis is VOA correspondent Jessica Stone. She is live at the White House. Hello to you, Jessica. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris is at the Munich Security Conference in Germany, where she is expected to lay out Washington's next steps in Ukraine. What can you tell us?
Well, that speech is actually scheduled for Saturday, and what we understand from the White House is that she will celebrate the bravery and the courageousness of the Ukrainians. She will condemn, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and she will reaffirm Washington's defense commitments as well as those of the international community to Ukraine while laying out the path ahead. Now, Harris is said to be expected to focus on, quote, a defense of international rules, norms, freedom and liberty. So far, the United States has sent some $48 billion in total aid to Ukraine. And of course, there are calls for additional aid being considered before the U.S. Congress. She's also going to meet with the UK, Swedish, and Finnish leaders on the sidelines of the meetings. Remember, just about a year ago, she met with Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and has yet to do so again since then. But all focus is going to really be on the Russian offensive that experts believe will be taking place in a matter of weeks this spring, getting the Ukrainians prepared with the types of training that you just saw there and additional supplies of ammunition in particular. Allison?
Right, now Chinese top diplomat Wang Yi is also attending the Munich conference. What are the chances of a meeting between US and Chinese officials?
Well, we are following this minute to minute because, of course, we do not yet have any confirmation of a confirmed meeting between Wang Yi and Secretary Blinken. We know that there are discussions taking place between the two diplomatic sides about such a meeting, and certainly there is plenty of reason to have one. Washington in particular says that the lack of military response to their inquiries after the Chinese spy balloon was discovered and then shot down is particularly concerning to them. The State Department has said consistently this week that they are keeping the lines of communication open with the Chinese, but this has really ballooned, if you'll forgive the pun, into quite a setback to international relations between the two largest economies in the world. And, you know, that's after Blinken canceled that meeting February 6th, which was expected to be the first face-to-face meeting between a U.S. official and a Chinese official in China in more than 4 years. As to the Chinese spy balloon, we know that Washington at this point has recovered some of the key sensors from that balloon, and they now have divers on the ocean floor looking for the additional pieces. At this point, they say they have recovered all of the pieces of that balloon on the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. Allison?
Right, Jessica, stay with us while we take a look at our next story. The U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin visited Estonia on Thursday, where the United States and NATO allies have increased deployment as part of a push to deepen defenses across NATO's eastern flank. Voice of America's Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb gained exclusive access to U.S. soldiers there as she crisscrossed the country to bring this ground report.
They're the closest U.S. soldiers to Russia's border, training with live fires in NATO ally Estonia on how to take turf from an enemy.
The overall end state of this is the platoon seizing that key piece of terrain, which is that enemy trench line.
Let's go, first squad, move!
Let's go!
U.S. soldiers with the 101st Airborne Division eliminate simulated enemy scouts and defenses.
Find the hole, find the hole, find the hole!
At a training site less than 50 kilometers from Russia,
Alpha 2, move up!
which invaded its non-NATO neighbor Ukraine 1 year ago.
And these are real case scenarios. You are seeing this play out on the battlefield in Ukraine.
Yeah, with any type of training exercise, we want to provide the most realistic training environment for our soldiers to better prepare them and our leaders for any type of challenges that are in the future.
Through the breach, getting into the trench. Oh.
Let's go!
Okay, so they just reached the objective, but they're still taking on enemy fire.
Team leader Liz Versova trains the platoon's weapons on the open field ahead.
Because we were expecting some enemy reinforcements, as well as a BMP-2, which is an infantry fighting vehicle.
They take that out with an AT-4, a weapon similar to the Javelin anti-tank missiles knocking out real armored vehicles in Ukraine.
Hey, target enemy. Full cyclist.
The enemy here is simulated, but the challenges are real. As soldiers used to desert warfare for the last 20 years build a new type of readiness.
A lot of the soldiers have not seen snow before in their entire lives, so being thrown into this environment can be challenging.
About 200 kilometers northwest, American HIMARS, multiple rocket launchers with the 1st Infantry Division, stand guard, sentinels shrouded by pines. Major Scott Clark is with the HIMARS team.
Stay in high positions and very well-concealed and covered locations for long periods of time. Once the fire mission is processed, in a matter of seconds, it's able to deliver its rockets or a missile.
The HIMARS and their operators arrived in December as part of the U.S. military's enhanced presence in the Baltics. At the beginning of last year, there were about 600 U.S. troops in the 3 Baltic nations. Now, there are about 1,500.
So they've got a defense set up right here.
Colonel Richard Ikena commands the 1st Infantry Division's artillery forces. He says U.S. HIMARS operators have trained in Estonia before, but now it's different because they're also part of Estonia's collective defense for an extended period of time.
We are in the scenario here. It really brings real time what is going on here in order to operate and to be as ready as possible.
Carla Babb, VOA News, Tapa, Estonia.
Now still with us for more analysis is VOA correspondent Jessica Stone. Now Jessica, back to you. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met with other NATO defense ministers this week as well. What is the US position on defending Estonia?
Well, of course, Estonia is part of NATO, so the U.S. takes its Article 5 responsibilities to other NATO countries very seriously, and Secretary Austin reinforced that this week in his meetings in both Brussels and Estonia. He says the U.S. has placed those troops in the Baltic states essentially just as soon as they were aware that the Russians were about to invade Ukraine, and as you saw in that tremendous footage with Carla Babb, they are part of the collective defense of Estonia. Meantime, Estonia is really putting a lot of its budget towards this effort. Estonia is actually putting more than 1% of its GDP towards this effort, and it's calling on the other NATO countries to put about $4.5 billion into investing in production of ammunition alone, because the Ukrainians are going through ammunition faster than it can be replaced. This has become a huge concern for all those that are supporting that effort. They made a formal proposal this week calling on their NATO members and NATO allies to do just that. We'll see what those other countries come back with. Allison.
Right. Now, Jessica, the other major foreign policy story in Washington this week is the unanswered questions around the Chinese spy balloon that was shot down 2 weeks ago. We've talked about the possibility of a diplomatic meeting to reopen the US and China dialogue. But President Joe Biden has been criticized for waiting more than 2 weeks to talk to the American people about the balloon. How has he addressed those concerns?
Well, he made some brief remarks publicly from the White House here late yesterday, in which he said that the other 3 objects that were shot down have now been determined by the intelligence community not to be connected to the Chinese spy program or any other spy program. And he essentially reiterated a number of things that we've already heard from members of Congress who've been in intelligence briefings this week on Capitol Hill. Biden has, of course, as you pointed out, caught a lot of heat for waiting so long to address the public. There is bipartisan criticism of the lack of information that is being released to the public about this program, about what they've found so far. But of course, the intelligence community does need some time to work behind closed doors. He's also been criticized for shooting down with very expensive missiles those 3 additional objects located in the sky to the tune of about $500,000 a missile. And the question has been raised, why did you choose to spend those missiles doing that? Are you going to continue to do that? He says that he did so previously out of, quote, an abundance of caution, not trying to set a precedent, but he makes no apologies, he says, for shooting down the balloon itself. Now, interestingly, President Biden does say that he plans to speak directly with President Xi Jinping of China by phone, trying to get more answers about the program, although we do not at this point, Allison, know when that will be. So we'll look for a readout in the coming days from the White House to see exactly how far that went, and hopefully a response from the Foreign Ministry as well.
Absolutely. Jessica, as always, great to speak to you. Thanks for being with us.